Good evening, everyone, and can I welcome everyone to the South Staffs Planning Committee tonight for the April meeting. I'll introduce the top table first. I'm the Chairman of the Planning Committee, Councillor Bob Cope. To my left is
Pardeep Sharma, Planning Solicitor.
Helen Bembo, Development Management Team Manager.
Kelly Harris, Lead Planning Manager.
Becca Potter, I'm one of the planning officers.
okay. Now, before we get to the actual applications, can I ask members of the public to respect these proceedings, please? Please don't shout out. You will hear arguments for and against the applications, but please respect the process. I would appreciate that. Thank you. Therefore, we move to the minutes of the last meeting, members. All those in favour that they are correct, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 2, apologies. Do we have any apologies? None from the floor? Councillor Spruce. Okay, Councillor Spruce. Oh yes, and Councillor Duncan. I forgot Councillor Duncan. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. So item 4. You okay? Yeah. You need to declare.
Do I need to declare? I'm just seeking some advice. I don't think so, but
Well, you're speaking, and then clearly you've spoken to the monitoring officer, so you know the process. Yes. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So we move on then to the planning applications. So the first one we're looking at tonight is 25/00181/FUL. This is the Star Inn, Market Street, Penkridge. And can I go over to Ellen to outline the application? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. This application relates to the Star Inn public house located off Market Street in the centre of Penkridge Village and the associated conservation area. The property occupies a prominent village centre location and is within the setting of a number of listed buildings. The Star Inn building itself is locally listed and is therefore regarded as a non-designated heritage asset. The application follows enforcement proceedings and therefore is retrospective. The proposal is for the retention of an existing marquee situated on the north side of the main building. So I'll just refer to the slides and show members some photographs of the site. So this one, you can see the north side of the building and the marquee is in the foreground there. It's the beige coloured structure to the side of the property. This is the view from the front of the property. There you can see the marquee on the left-hand side. And just a closer view there of the side of the property itself. So the marquee is covering a seating area, and then you can see the side wall of the actual public house itself. So the applicant has explained that the marquee was installed to enhance the guest experience when taking part in external drinking and dining and includes events. As outlined in full in the officer report, officers do have significant concerns over the design, materiality and appearance of the marquee, which is not in keeping with the character of the conservation area. The Senior Conservation Officer considers that the proposed marquee causes a moderate level of less than substantial harm to the character of the conservation area and the setting of the designated and non-designated heritage assets. It is considered that the public benefits that have been advanced in support of the proposal, either alone or in combination, fail to outweigh this harm that the proposed marquee causes to the heritage assets. Furthermore, insufficient information has been submitted to demonstrate that the loss of the marquee would make the public house unviable. Officers have worked positively and proactively with the applicant and invited amended plans to replace the proposed marquee with a more in keeping structure. However, the applicant has declined to submit amendments as they consider the current proposals to be entirely acceptable. So just a couple of plans here which show the location of the marquee. So it's outlined in red there. So you can see the car park to the front of the public house and then Marketplace there to the north. The application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. We don't have anyone speaking against tonight, and we don't have anyone speaking for this application tonight. But we do have the applicant's agent from Pegasus, which is Kerry Walker. Kerry, can you go to the lectern? You have 3 minutes, Kerry. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The scheme before you at the Star Inn comprises the retention of a marquee in the centre of Penkridge. Due to its central location within Penkridge, it represents a highly popular and valued meeting space for the local community. Contrary to the officer recommendation before you, the proposal is appropriate in design and has carefully considered the heritage context. The marquee has a de minimis heritage impact on the fabric of the Star Inn. The size, appearance and siting of the marquee means that only glimpse views of the marquee are present from key heritage views within the conservation area. The proposal therefore results in no harm to the significance of the Star Inn, nor the conservation area. Equally, the design of the marquee is not harmful to the character and appearance of the conservation area or street scene generally. The officer report raises concerns that the marquee is not of traditional design and construction. However, this is an inconsistent approach, with the nearby Littleton Arms at St Michael's Square recently receiving planning approval for a similar canopy on what was a statutory listed building. The Littleton Arms site is therefore more sensitive in heritage terms than the application site before you, and is located in a similarly prominent location within the conservation area. Notwithstanding this, the Stars Inn prominent location within the village is exactly why the marquee generates a significant number of public benefits for the local community, which outweigh any suggested heritage harm. Notably, the marquee acts as a key meeting point for the community, being regularly frequented by charities who use it for fundraising events. This includes Brighter Days Rescue Dog Charity, who use the outdoor facility for fundraising events. The marquee also acts as a very important social space for birthdays and other celebrations. This helps to attract people to the retail centre, which in turn helps to enhance the vitality of Penkridge and the High Street. Furthermore, a number of local sports clubs also use the marquee for social events, including Penkridge Netball Club, who do not have their own clubhouse facility. It is also well known that high street operators, including pubs, are in a precarious trading position currently. The marquee provides a hugely important revenue stream because it can be used across all seasons. This helps to secure the long-term vitality of this locally listed heritage asset. The benefits of the marquee are evidenced by the significant public support for this application, with the MP writing in support, as well as 167 responses from the public expressing their strong support. Furthermore, no other objections have been received from any other statutory consultees except Heritage. We therefore politely request that members of committee approve the development proposal to ensure that the public benefits it brings to the local community and Penkridge Village can continue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kerry. Therefore, we go to the local member. Yeah, you're staying there, are you? Okay, over to Councillor Sam Harper. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. I'm going to try and keep this really concise and to the point. This is one of those very rare applications where pretty much the whole application relies on a subjective interpretation of harm, which we don't usually get in this committee. Oftentimes we have to follow the local plan or master plans that have been put in place, but this one, you guys can really listen to the arguments of the officer and make your own interpretation of that. So I'm going to present some reasons and arguments that you guys can use tonight to justify approving the application today. The concept of less than substantial harm is a broad spectrum, and in this case, I believe the scale of public benefit is so significant that it tips it in favour, admittedly, though it is close. This marquee is not a minor addition to their pub. It is a core reason of the pub's current success. It provides 60 additional covers, which account for nearly 50% of the total internal capacity. So since the introduction of the marquee, the business has seen trade almost double, allowing the pub to grow its local workforce from 2 to 5. So those aren't real, these are not just statistics, they're real livelihoods of real local people that exist. It also means that the pub can continue to serve as a vital community hub and is viable. So the arguments, the NPPF, specifically section 6 of the NPPF, dictates that significant weight should be placed on the need to support economic growth and productivity. And then it says, especially in rural areas where businesses must adapt to survive. So while the officer describes the marquee as an alien feature, we must consider that it's high quality. In my opinion, and my subjective opinion, I think it fits in with the local visual surroundings. And as we heard from the agent, it's only a glimpse. You can only see it a glimpse from heritage assets. So I think the harm is particularly low. Crucially, though, the structure is reversible with removable anchor bolts. So there's not actually any permanent damage to the heritage asset as it is currently. So if they want to change it, then the rest of the surrounding area would remain untouched. The small concerns raised around neighbours about noise, our environmental health officer raised no objections and they did a full thing. You can see that in the report. Obviously, there's overwhelming public support, and you guys can see that from the comments, the parish council supporting it and everyone here tonight, that further proves the public benefit to this application. Finally, our strategic objective 11 of our local plan explicitly asks us to support a vibrant and prosperous local economy whilst enhancing the visibility of the viability of village centres. So I can't see an application that doesn't do this better than this one here today. So today I'm asking you to prioritise the local jobs, the survival of a thriving business and the wishes of a local community over a subjective disagreement regarding the appearance of a temporary and reversible structure. Please move to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe you're going to leave the room. Thank you. Right, members, it's over to yourselves. Does anybody want to start? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I've read it correctly, there's going to be music. Is that going to be played from the marquee? Within the marquee?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So yeah, the events that are held in the marquee can include music, but there has been a noise assessment done in terms of the nature of the noise emitting from that area, and we don't have concerns about the noise with regards to neighbouring residents and the way that that area is used. So we are very comfortable that there's no noise issues relating from the structure. The main concerns from an officer perspective is the heritage harm. Thank you, Chair.
To come back.
Yep. Thank you very much, because that was my concern, because we have more people here complaining about noise if it's a problem, and I don't know that they get a license. They've got to get a license for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go in depth on this. I'm sorry about this. First, I'm going to go to the planning applications that has originally gone through the Star Public House, and out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2 refused, 1 in 1978 and 1 in 2007, and all the rest have been totally approved subject to conditions, which include basically full renovation from a house to a pub and all sorts of, because back in the day it used to be a shop, so it's gone through a massive transition. If I can ask the officers go back to the photos, one concern I am concerned about is you're saying heritage asset. Why have we only got pictures of the public house on one dimension, because right opposite, which is a grade 1 listed building, which is the old schoolhouse, there is a modern building connected to that how that got passed, I do not know, because that is not in keeping, yet this is being refused, which is highly controversial. I cannot understand. On other parts of the officer's report, I've gone through it, highlighted lots in blue. A lot of it is for the permission, but the officer, Gareth Dwight, at the last minute changed his, because one thing that's a bit sparse, why I'm concerned of, is that he's saying the heritage is a moderate, whereas not severe. Can you give an example of that example? Because the economical, as my colleague has said, has clearly demonstrated that there'll be lost jobs. Pubs are in decline. One closes every week in this country, and that will put in the region not only of a landlord, but also of staff of 30 people, because you've got cooks, you've got waiters, you've got bar, you've got glass cleaners that will be unemployed, and that will put more pressure on our economy where we're supposed to be supporting these industries. On a further point, the other officers being, let me just go to them. The environmental officer, the conservation officer, and it clearly reads 6.310. The SCO further advises that there are no conservation objections to the principle of the use of the area or functions. Now, the question I'm going to ask is, if that marquee is taken away, are people really expecting to go and stand out in the rain when it's rain, and when you've got a full pub on the inside, that they'll stand outside in the rain? It's going to have a knock-on effect. They'll go, I ain't going to go because it's lost its marquee. It's going to have a knock-on effect. Common sense will tell you it is going to have a massive knock-on effect. Regarding paragraph 215, the MPPF, well, 216 gives you a clear indication that we should support these sort of applications, not come back on just a minor incident of a, non-designated asset, because it's not, knocking down walls or reshaping the building in any shape or form. It's, that can be taken down at any time. And it's saying that the planners have worked proactively with the agents or with the Well, I disagree. I don't think they have. I think they've been, this has been waiting to come to this committee now for more than 12 months. Now, what's been the delay? That's some of the questions. Please, first chair.
Finished with the questions, yeah?
Yeah.
Ellen?
Yeah, I'll go through them in order, Councillor Kelly. If I do miss anything, please do come back to me, because there's quite a few points to cover there. I completely agree with your point on the history. The history is clear. There's been quite a lot of approvals, but as members know, we have to look at each case on its merits. So we have to balance all up the relevant concerns to make sure we get to the point of approval. It would surprise me if you weren't seeing a planning history that wasn't a lot more approvals, because very much our job is to work towards approvals. That's what we do, and make sure that we are getting to that point where if there are concerns, we address them and work positively and proactively. So that doesn't surprise me that list reads as such. The photos on the presentation, as you know, are very much delivered in the spirit of helpfulness. The context of the marquee with regard to the property itself was what we're trying to get across here, but the wider file has all the details of the designated and non-designated heritage assets, and that sits within that context. I disagree with your comment about the last minute change. I think what we've tried to do as officers is put logically in order what the benefits are of the development, then what the negatives are. And as members are well aware, our job is then to balance all of those up and come to a determination whether the benefits outweigh the harm or vice versa. So it would be remiss of me to sit here and say there aren't any benefits. Of course there are, you know, and that's been articulated in the report. But to be clear, that's not a change. That's making sure that members have got the benefit of all of the positives and the negatives in order to first of all see how officers have come to that balancing exercise, because it is a balancing exercise, and ultimately, you know, make their own minds up on whether they think that's appropriate. The principle of the development, as you said, the senior conservation officer is fine with a form of development in this location. And the reason it's been on the officer's desk for 12 months is because he's been working towards alternative schemes that are considered to be appropriate. The reason it's before members this evening recommended for refusal is the applicant would not agree to a change. We are very supportive of an alternative here. We just don't feel that the marquee in its current position and the impact it has on the heritage assets is appropriate when you balance everything up. The loss of jobs I did just want to touch on as well. The other reason for the delay is we've had to go back and forth with Marston's, who are the brewery here, to make sure we've got the appropriate information so that we can appropriately balance up the benefits of the development. We haven't been given what we consider to be clear and overriding evidence that the benefits are there. The job losses is inconclusive in the evidence that we've got. It reads that there could be job losses, but when you look at the evidence that was provided, which includes the beerage totals and the amount of covers, it's very unclear, and it doesn't result in the fact that there will be job losses. That's not evidence that we've seen. Likewise, the development proposals that are put forward here and the balancing exercise for the benefits doesn't include the area that was approved by committee quite recently for the front. I don't know, members recall there was a decking area to the frontage and that was approved retrospectively. The numbers of the covers there aren't taken into consideration either. So it's not that we haven't had the evidence, we've had some, but it's very inconclusive to say that the benefits of the scheme outweigh the harm. What officers very much wanted to achieve here was a better form of development in that location, because we do want that area to be usable. Clearly, if the marquee goes, it'll be usable in the summer. Events can still be held there. You know, we're not naive to the fact it will impact on the use of that area when the weather is poor or is not as clement as it is today. We're not saying that something can't go there. We just want a better form of development that we've got in front of us. Sorry, Councillor Kelly, did I cover your points there?
Regarding the time extent when a development was done, it says in the report that and you've explained that to me in an email today, that it was down to Marston's, that the canopy was done in 2024. Well, in fact, it wasn't. It was done in 2020, and there's Google Maps go back that far to show that that was up and in place in 2020, and therefore, as I say, during COVID, it was allowed, and I've got the legislation here, extension of planning permission 2020-21, permission expiring March 23. The consultation took place in 2022, and it was done by Robert Jennick, the housing minister at the time, who says that that piece of law will be made permanent, and that outside structures will be made, and that has been up there for more than 5 years. So how is it that, is it the planner's contention that because Marston says it was finalised in 24, that that element was out of date? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's been raised by a lot of the residents actually in terms of the date that the structure was erected. We specifically asked Marston's, and that was formed part of the application, that it was installed in 2024. So that's what we've been considering. we have looked back through some photographic evidence. We can't find it back as far as 2020. But I think what we members have got to be mindful of is, yes, there's a period that a development or a structure becomes lawful, but that's considered under a certificate of lawfulness. And what happens then is the applicant, the agent, the brewery, whoever it may be, puts together the evidence to say it's been there for that long, continuously in use. We haven't seen that, and that's not what this application is. The application before you is a planning application to assess it on its merits. If we were to receive an application for a certificate, of course, we would assess that. We would look at the evidence that was submitted and we'd make a judgment on that. But we have to look at the application that's in front of us, and the evidence that we received as part of this application was that it was installed in 2024. So yeah, we are determining it on that basis. Thank you, Chair.
You want to come back further?
Sorry, the Conservation Officer clearly states in 2 reports that there's only moderate. My other question was, what determines severe? What would you class as severe, and what would you class as moderate? And why? How is this affecting a moderate?
Yeah, sorry, you did ask me that and I didn't come back on that point. So when you're looking at heritage harm, it's quite accurate how Councillor Harper-Wallace described it. It's a subjective sliding scale. So it goes from less than substantial harm, but that isn't a point, that's the sliding scale. So it can be less than substantial, moderate, less than substantial, incidental. There's lots of different elements on that. The professionally qualified conservation officer thinks it's moderate, and therefore we have to put moderate in the balance when it comes to the public benefits, which I've articulated we don't feel are robust enough to outweigh the harm. For it to be severe, again, it depends on the nature of the host building and the surrounding designated heritage assets, and of course the conservation area here. So it's, again, each case on its merits, but severe harm is quite a high bar, is what I would say. So we tend to find ourselves in the territory of the less than substantial harm and where that falls on the scale. But it's not a hard and fast that I could answer and say that in this case substantial harm would be X. Depends on the nature of the proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Have you got more questions?
Couple more, Chair, then I'm finished.
Link a couple together
Yeah,
rather than go
please.
backwards and forwards.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So 6.45, the environmental officer, it's been highlighted in the documents that it's the noise complaints and stuff like that. That is totally separate and not a planning issue, correct?
It is a planning issue, but it's not one we're concerned about in terms of matters arising. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Because he clearly says as under EQ9, this is acceptable. On the further point I raise is the MPPF 115 and 116 clearly states, to me, it's ambiguous. It clearly states opposites, which you could, the balance of probability, I would say it goes more in favour to allowing the application than not. And on human rights, the element 6.8, I would say, how are disabled people supposed to use the public areas, whereas that sort of element would protect them from being in the rain, cold weather, smokers, because, as I say, that's what those areas were designed for.
Ellen?
Yeah, just to come back, obviously human rights is a consideration. It's in the report. We make sure that we cover that off. In terms of obviously accessibility to the pub, that's covered under building regulations, not planning. There's an element of crossover. But I think what we've got to be mindful of here is we've got the outside area that's covered by the marquee. We've also got the internals of the pub, which is approximately the same number of covers. So we appreciate this is quite a large area, but we've also got the approval for the decked area to the frontage. So there are options in terms of drinking and dining and what options can be delivered in terms of that space that is afforded. Thank you, Chair.
Have you finished? Yeah, go on.
In part, I understand where you're coming from, but the options are the outside decking isn't covered. So nobody's going to sit there in the cold winter days, whereas under the covers, they're going to sit there and have drinks. It's regularly used at night by people using from football clubs, from hockey clubs, and all that sort of facilities. And whereas the outside decking is only used peak time of summers.
Couldn't agree with you more. We would have loved nothing better than, from an officer's perspective, to be able to continue negotiations on a more appropriate development form. We just don't think we should be accepting something that is substandard and subpar and negative in terms of heritage assets when there could be appropriate alternatives available to us, and we would like to progress those. But we got to a point where those negotiations weren't going any further. So we had to get to a point where we were determining the application. But yeah, I agree with you completely. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, have you finished? One last one. Okay.
Oh, could I ask for if it's a condition that may be implemented, that a 3-year temporary period be implemented while negotiations carry on between the council and the landlord to try and resolve this matter?
I think through you, Chair, in terms of conditions, what I would actually ask members to do is to deal with the motion, but certainly, if it is a case that this application is recommended for approval, conditions can be delegated to your officers in consultation with the chair. So, that will be perfectly acceptable.
Okay, finished. Any more speakers? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a question about the point of harm, especially 2 points on the officer's report, 5.5 and then 6.3.9. 5.5 talks about an additional heritage statement that's been submitted. And it says at this section of the report, the statement concludes that there will be no harm caused by the retention of the marquee due to the impact upon the character of the Star Inn and views from Cannock Road. And there are no objections, it continues, there are no objections to the principle of the use of this area for functions. And then a moderate level of less than substantial harm. And 6.3.9 says 2 heritage statements have been submitted in support of the proposal, and the latter concludes that there will be no harm caused by the retention of the marquee due to the impact of the character of the Star Inn and views from Cannock Road. And then the senior conservation officer advises this about glimpses due to angle view. What I'm trying to do, I've got that report that's saying no harm, and then this less than substantial moderate harm, and trying to weigh that in. So my question is, how severe is the harm really to the heritage asset, consider, especially against the economic benefits? Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, so where you're referring to in the report, the 2 heritage statements, they were provided by Marston's. I have to, whilst heritage harm is a scale, I'm very confident at sitting here and saying I wholly disagree that there is no harm, because I think everyone can see from the photos there's a degree of harm. So to say there's no harm, in my professional opinion, is wholly inaccurate. What we're discussing here is where the harm is on that scale. So the conservation officer from the council, the senior conservation officer, considers it to be moderate harm to the heritage assets, specifically the listed structures and the views from those towards it. So I think what you've got to bear in mind is there was a view put forward from the applicant, which I don't think it's difficult to disagree with, because there is an element of harm. Where that sits on the scale, in our professional opinion, is moderate. And then you balance that up against the benefits, so the public benefits, which we've done, and the public benefits were not seen to outweigh the heritage harm, because there was a lot of inconsistencies and shortfalls in the information that was provided. But you're absolutely right. The principle of it, the principle of providing something here, we would be very supportive of. And we did want to continue negotiations for something more appropriate. We just don't think this is the solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You happy with that?
So just to be clear, the principle of the marquee isn't the issue. It's in its current form, as we can see there. Is that the issue?
It's the principle of providing some covered area here is not a problem. The conservation officer has made some suggestions to Marston's of ways that would create exactly the same covered area outside, but it's just a different design approach. But they haven't been forthcoming with entering into negotiation with them. So yes, you're correct. It's this design of marquee that are raising the heritage concerns. Thank you, Chair.
You want to come back, Councillor Jackson?
Yes, yeah. Just to make a comment, really, I think from my perspective, if the economic benefits were so strong, which I'm not convinced that you can make such a conclusive link between a marquee and those benefits, I can't understand why the pub wouldn't be a little bit more cooperative and come to a mutually agreeable position.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Councillor Essendon.
I think I'm sort of going along with what Councillor Jackson's just said, because when I first saw the photograph of it, it looked to me as if it had collapsed. I think the design is, that's not first of all like it. And also, could you give us a reason why they've actually refused to consider anything else? So I think that's quite pertinent. Thank you.
Yeah, so the suggestions that we've gone down the route of is a wooden framed mono pitch structure with something that had almost like a tiled finish. So it still looks almost semi-temporary because it wouldn't bolt to the original building or sit to the wall, but it would give a covered area. I'm speculating, if I'm being honest. We had no robust reasoning, but obviously this is in place. Removal would cost, there'd be a cost to that, and so there would be to materials and providing a new element. So in Marston's defence, if they wanted this considered, that might be route one. If this isn't successful, then maybe we can open those negotiations again. But I suspect it would be around, the cost element, because this is already in situ. Thank you, Chair.
Want to come back?
I understand all that. Do you think it could be a different sort of design, because it does look as if it's just had some sheets thrown over your line props, like when you used to make your tents when you were little. So I think it's the design of it looks as if it's collapsing.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm in a rock and a hard place with this, I'm afraid. I know that planning matters, but the economics of this are, to me, are very frustrating. The fact that if this isn't granted, they claim they're going to lose 50% of their covers on the application. But if Marston's won't negotiate, as we've been told by Helen, it's very frustrating, very sad. But there's got to be a little bit more give and take, I think, from them if they really want to get this through, and they want to save the threatened jobs, inverted commas. And I find that very, very frustrating.
Yeah, it's a fair point, Councillor Davis, and to say some of those figures that have been quoted, we've worked through them again based on the evidence, and it doesn't necessarily back up the comments, the evidence base that we've had, because yet loss of jobs, that would be weighed heavily in the favour. So would have some of the elements about the pub becoming unviable. What we've got at this stage is comments and statements, but we don't have the evidence to back that up. But rest assured, we'd look at the opportunity to review some of that information should it be provided, because that's kind of what we need in order to form that appropriate balance. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as Councillor Davis has just said, I'm between rock and a hard place. I think the emotional aspect of keeping people in work versus the ugly aperture that we've got there, that does a disservice to heritage building. So I really do think that they need to go back to the drawing board and looking at this as there should be a low level timber structure. I think that would be really, really good, and maybe go back to Marston's. But I mean, I'm all for saving the high street. I'm currently involved with something in my area with businesses. So, but as I say, it's sort of emotional as opposed to professional. And I think I'm erring on the side of professional. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I'll come to you in a minute. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support both Councillor Hine and Chairman, Councillor Davis, in their opinions. I too believe that we're sitting here tonight because they wouldn't go around, get around the table and talk about what could be achieved. And this is the sticking point. That to me is out of keeping. I don't have to be a conservation officer or anything else. Just looking at it, just doesn't look right. I think that trying to get something that's more acceptable, and they've failed to negotiate, well, they're stuck. Because I'm going to support the recommendation. And I think one or two will. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Barrow.
I think, thank you, Chair. I think we have to consider heritage laws are very important. And, you know, it's how you try and work with those laws to keep the things that we value, the buildings that we value, against the things of a tent, for lack of a better word, hanging on the side. So I think I'm fully in agreement with the rest of the planning committee. It's not the fact of having it, it's the fact of what it looks like. And I think that doesn't help the heritage of the building, which is a beautiful building. It's being spoilt by this tent on the side.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a discussion regarding planning balance. I've changed my mind probably 3 times during this debate. The marquee isn't permanent, but can I ask a question? If it is removed in the winter or not, or is it? Do we know that for definite? It's not removed.
No, it's permanently there, and what you'll be assessing this evening is the retention of that 12 months of the year. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that then, because in the statements from Marston's, the last paragraph said, from a business perspective, the marquee was installed to increase the number of external covers for busier trade, such as the summer months, which I think is quite important. But highways have no objection, so there's no issues there with parking. But I'm still struggling. Let me just go through my notes. Yeah, what would be, I know you briefly mentioned it, Helen, what would be a more appropriate form? Some form of conservatory?
I think there's quite a few options, to be honest, that could be more appropriate. But what we're looking at is something, to go back to that view, something that's a bit lower, because that is quite high, and the way that it kind of impacts on that flank wall of the locally listed building and then the views from the listed building. So I think the height's an issue. The materials, again, we've got concerns with, given just the visual appearance. But I think, in all honesty, you're probably talking about some kind of wooden structure, pergola style. But you can put a, you know, a substantial roof on it in terms of something with a slight mono pitch, for example. I'm saying all of this without the benefit of assessing it, but I do think there's options of something that could achieve the same number of external covers and make it more weatherproof. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor
Steele. We've talked a lot about heritage, but it's not a nationally listed building because it's not grade 2. I think it's called locally listed. I've not heard of that before, really. So I don't think that carries that much weight. But I have to say, I am disappointed at Marston's position, really. If it really means if there was a more permanent type of extension, then surely there'd be more business all the year round. That one's just come to me when I spotted that regarding the summer months. So I'd written down originally on planning balance, I think the scales are tipped in favour of retention, but I've changed my mind. So I think on planning balance, taking everything into account, I think the scales are tipped in favour of refusal. That's my final comment.
Anybody else wish to speak? No, I'm going to go to the vote then. The recommendation is for refusal. All those in favour of refusal, please. Councillor Kelly.
Can I ask for a name vote, please?
Yes, you can. Yep. All those in favour of refusal, please show. Okay. All those against, please show. Are there any abstentions? That application is refused, 11 votes to 2. Thank you. Members of the public, can I thank you for being patient through that? I'll give you a chance to leave now because we've got other applications. But thank you for listening to the debate. Thank you. Okay then, members, we move on. This is the second application, which is 25/00623/FUL, and this is Magazine Field, Magazine Lane at Wheaton Aston, and it's an erection of one dwelling. Over to you, Alan. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. Should we invite Councillor Harper Wallace back in?
Sorry, good point. I forgot that. Sorry, Councillor, we almost forgot. Okay, right, we'll resume. Over to Ellen to outline the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is currently divided into paddocks with sheep grazing. There's an existing parking area at the entrance to the site, and the land is accessed off Magazine Lane, which provides access into and out of the village via Dirty Lane and Greenhill Lane. Part of Magazine Lane itself is a public right-of-way. Adjacent to the site is the Shropshire Union Mainline Canal Conservation Area. The site is adjacent to the northern tip of Wheaton Aston Village and sits within the open countryside. So this slide just gives members a little bit of context. So on the left-hand side here, you can see this is the application site and the proposed dwelling. This is the access road here, and then it links to the main road there on that bend. This site plan on the right-hand side shows you a layout of the actual site itself. So permission is sought for the erection of one 4-bed dwelling with a large rear garden. The dwelling is proposed to be of single-storey contemporary design with a flat roof and extending to a height of 3.55 metres. A weathered stone finish is proposed with mirrored window openings, which are intended to reflect the surrounding landscape and allow the building to assimilate comfortably with the surroundings. So this slide shows you the floor plan layout and how the property would sit within the plot itself, parking to the frontage, as you can see there. So this is the single-storey layout of the proposed property. So you'll see to the top of that slide is the living accommodation, where you've got the family room, the dining, the kitchen and the lounge. And to the bottom part is where the bedrooms are located, and you have that central entrance lobby. So this is one of the elevation plans that is being considered this evening. As you can see, flat roof, contemporary design and split over two areas of the site. And this is a photo montage just showing what visually it would look like. So you can see the flat roof and you can see the mirrored windows, which give that reflection back into the surrounding landscape. So given that the council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, there is a tilted balance in favour of approving the development unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Whilst there is a presumption against new dwellings in open countryside, the proposal is low-lying and would be well screened from the wider area. As such, there would be no harm to the character and appearance of the landscape. The site also sits outside the development boundary. However, it is within walking distance of the facilities offered within the wider village. The low-lying nature and position of the proposal within the site, coupled with the proposed landscaping, would ensure that there would be no harm to the integrity of the adjacent canal or the significance of the canal conservation area, as the harm would constitute less than substantial and is considered at the lower level. In addition, there are no undue concerns arising in relation to highway safety, parking, ecology, biodiversity, arboriculture or residential amenity. It's therefore concluded that there are no sufficiently strong reasons arising from the impacts of the development to warrant refusal of the application, and the proposal would constitute an additional dwelling to the council's housing land supply, which would be to the benefit of the development. On balance, therefore, it is considered the proposal complies with the provisions of the NPPF and the relevant policies within the core strategy. Approval is therefore recommended, subject to a unilateral undertaking in relation to the Cannock Chase stack. Just a few photos of the site itself for members' benefit. So the one on the left-hand side is the view down Magazine Lane. That looks towards the site entrance on the right, and the right-hand picture shows you the site entrance. The one on the left-hand side is the parking area, and then on the right is the gate to the existing field, and just to the rear there you can see that that's a canal barge. That's where the canal is located. This one on the left-hand side is looking along the eastern boundary of the site, and then on the right-hand side you're looking towards the northwest, and again you can see the canal. I'll just get my cursor there in the right-hand side of the picture. This is a view looking into the site, so you can see the existing fence and structures, and the dwelling would be roughly positioned behind where that existing shed is located, this being reformalised as the parking area. And there, that final view gives you a look in a more clearer perspective towards the canal itself. You can just see the canal barges there. So approval is recommended, Chair, subject to a unilateral undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. We've got one speaker speaking against this application, which is Andrew Jones. Can you go to the lectern, please? You have 3 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Chairman, thank you very much. Good evening. I am objecting to the application for a substantial dwelling on Magazine Lane. The proposal is inappropriate for its location, unsupported by related evidence, and harmful to the character of that part of the village. First, Magazine Lane is unsuitable for development of this scale. It is extremely narrow. The lane is extremely narrow, in poor condition, and already difficult for farm traffic and heavy vehicles to use. Crucially, it does not provide reliable access for 999 vehicles. A dwelling here would increase vehicle movements on the lane that is already inadequate. Second, the application includes land that the applicant does not own. The red boundary covers land outside their ownership, raising issues of access, right of way, the legality of the development footprint. A major dwelling should not be approved where ownership is ambiguous, nor should planning create opportunities for adverse possession. Third, the eco house claims are largely unsupported. There is no substantive technical detail on mains connection, water storage, power generation, drainage, waste or refuse management. Without this information, neither environmental impact nor sustainability claims can be meaningfully assessed, increasing the likelihood of the retrospective or piecemeal applications. Fourth, the design is out of keeping with its setting. This modern intrusive structure sits beside the canal conservation area that is rural and an established dark landscape. The current mooring use has minimal impact. A large illuminated dwelling would create significant light pollution, disturbing tranquility and affecting wildlife after dark. Fifth, there is no agricultural or functional need. Approving a speculative, non-essential house here undermines planning consistency and fairness. Sixth, the site lies outside the village envelope. The local plan identifies suitable, sustainable housing sites within the settlement boundary. This site is open countryside where new residential development is discouraged. There is no justification for expanding into sensitive rural land whilst allocated sites remain available. Finally, this proposal is a Trojan horse. It would set a precedent for future canal site development. Adjacent land is already being marketed as strategic land. Approval here would make resisting future applications far more difficult and enable incremental, unplanned, large-scale expansion outside of the village envelope. As a long-standing local resident, I believe this proposal is opportunistic, poorly evidenced and incompatible with the character and constraints of Magazine Lane. For reasons of access, safety, environmental impact, design and policy and precedent, I ask you please to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We don't have a speaker speaking for this application, but we do have the agent from Architecture and Design. That's Josh Foster. Could you go to the lectern, please? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening to all members. I'm Josh Foster, Chartered Architect from Foster Architecture and Design and agent for my client, Mr. Summers. I'd like to take my allocated time to address the concerns raised regarding the proposed development. Firstly, I'd like to clarify the position regards to proposed access to the site. My client is not claiming ownership of the access track. In order to comply with planning policy, a red line boundary needs to demonstrate its access from a public highway. The red line boundary did not demonstrate a claim of ownership of the land, and the appropriate certificate D was submitted during the planning application process to confirm that my client does not own the track, nor is it known who owns the track, and as such was publicly advertised in the local press in accordance with relevant planning guidance. It is also important to note that Staffordshire County Highways have raised no objections to the grounds of access as subject to appropriate conditions being posed which relate to the parking arrangements, which predominantly include the improvement of the existing parking arrangements that have been shown in the photographs previously. Regarding Greenbelt and planning policy, both my client and myself undertook the recommended pre-application inquiry process in January 2025, where it was confirmed that the council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and as a result there would be a presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out in paragraph 11D of the NPPF. The pre-application concluded that, taking into account the single-storey nature of the development and the design proposed, it's considered that there'd be unlikely to be any adverse harm on the character of the landscape. And in addition, whilst it sits outside of the village boundary, it is not in a wholly isolated location, and there are services and facilities within walking distance. Regarding the ecology matters that have been raised, both Natural England and South Staffordshire Council's ecology officer were appropriately consulted during the application process and concluded Natural England will likely be satisfied that there will be no adverse effect on the integrity of the site inhabitants in relation to recreational disturbance, and that they're satisfied that the proposal will have no adverse effect in relation to the Cannock Chase Special Area of Conservation. The application site lies approximately 830 metres east of Motty Meadows Special Area of Conservation at its closest point, with no public access other than by a prior arrangement with Natural England, and as such would not give rise to the direct disturbance of inhabitants and species. It's also important to note that we have appropriately obtained the appropriate Great Crested Noose licence in accordance with relevant policy. Therefore, to conclude, the proposal has been informed by pre-application advice provided by South Staffordshire Council. It aligns with national policy in the context of the current housing land supply provision. It represents a modest development with limited visual impact and has been supported subject to condition by highways, conservation and ecology consultees. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the committee supports the application. And with regards to the design, if we could just go back to the photograph, the design has been included a mirrored facade to actually reflect the natural vegetation to minimise the visual impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. We don't have local member present tonight, so it's over to you members. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A bit of concern on the size of the field, and that one would expect something else to be built on there, like a stable. And we've experienced happening where the stable has got a French window and a chimney. So you've got to be very careful about PD on these big fields. So where does the PD fit? The whole of that field?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, I think to be clear on this one, what we're looking at here is a residential property. So we're not doing the first instance stable, then it becomes a dwelling. So we're looking at a dwelling in the first instance. So residential curtilage is what you're seeing there in terms of a large garden. Permitted development rights do apply, obviously, if you have a residential property, but we do have the ability to remove them should that become necessary. But I think what's important with this one is this is what we call a self-build. So the gentleman who owns the field is building it for his own family use. And yes, other buildings could come forward in the future, but then we would just assess them on the merits. But in terms of permitted development rights, they are afforded with any residential dwelling unless they're restricted by way of planning condition. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reading on page 33, 140, under objections. It mentions that Magazine Lane is used by pedestrians and gives direct access between a children's play park and the canal, raising concerns regarding pedestrian safety. Do we have any visual which can show us how far the play park is away from the intended build, please? And how many points of access are there to the play park? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. This is the only plan that I've got. Obviously, again, this doesn't form the whole context of the planning file, so members do need to go and look at that. This is the access track. I don't know if you can see my cursor, which is going along there. So it's currently used for vehicles and agricultural vehicles. And obviously the current landowner has the right of access along that track to their current field and paddock. So this is the wider area here, and it is used for access to other parts of the area. There would be very little difference in our opinion in terms of the traffic that would be moving for a dwelling than there would be for the existing agricultural field and grazing element. So there's no additional harm there because the use would be quite similar. The right of access does exist. We've checked that to make sure that there is a right of access, but it is a kind of footpath as well as a vehicle access, so it's shared. As long as the rights of access are in place and County Council are consulted in terms of highway safety and the impact on the public right of way, which they have been in this case, and are minded to not raise any objections, then from a planning perspective, we don't see the harm to be any greater than the existing use. Thank you, Chair.
Any more speakers? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding design and impact and the canal conservation area. It just states in several bulletins that the design is not in keeping with the character of the properties of the village, dominated by the view of the canal towpath. There should be protected conservation buffer between the canal and development. It has been heard that the water will be collected off the roof. Substantial water storage would require bigger tanks to store the water, as well as runoff that would go into the canal, and protected species, which to me, I think there's a bit of a concern there, as well as, utilities getting to the place will need to go through all that lane.
Helen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so you're reading from the objector comments there, in terms of the ones that have been outlined in the report. We're content that there's enough of a buffer between the actual property itself. Bear in mind it's low level. We're only talking single story. Design concerns, it doesn't look like any of the other properties that you would see on your way into accessing this, but it doesn't read within that context, so it doesn't need to be a pastiche or a copy of what's there. It's one of those few sites where you can be a little bit more unique. Whether you like it or not, it's a subjective matter, but I don't think there's any context with regards to the existing buildings that you would need to draw cues from. The conservation area again is covered, where we've noted that it's less than substantial harm again, but on the lower end this time because of the scale of the building, the fact it's low level, and the substantial landscaping scheme that's associated with this, which is covered by condition. So again, on balance, you have to look at all that within the context of there being no 5-year supply. So if we don't have a 5-year land supply, there has to be very strong reasons to refuse. So we would look at this as a single windfall site. But all the technical matters, as you will see from the report, have been addressed. We understand concerns from residents, especially with regard to a different design approach. But yeah, thank you, Chair.
Want to come back?
Just last point, regarding TPOs on trees and stuff like that. Are any trees going to be removed to make this dwelling for access for the vehicles to get in? If so, is there a condition that they will plant trees for the uplift?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's conditions regarding the landscape and the tree protection, so that would be maintained. In terms of construction, I think that's probably likely to be the main pinch point, should we call it that, and obviously getting materials up to that point, but there will be a construction management plan in order to be able to demonstrate that that's appropriate. But if there's protected trees, they have been given full consideration, and any additional trees would be secured through the landscaping plan. Thank you, Chair.
Just quick point, because being in the conservation area, the trees automatically become protected, don't they?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Trees that fall over a certain size within a conservation area are automatically afforded protection. They need a notification in order to be removed, but we have to be mindful that planning permissions overrule that. So that's what you are considering. Thank you, Chair.
Any more speakers? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at Inland Waterways Association comments, and they are objecting, and the point they're making, and I tend to agree with it. The site is outside the approved settlement boundary of the village, but also the building in this particular area would extend the canal side development of the village into what is currently open countryside. And I do have a problem with that. Thank you.
Helen?
Yeah, agreed. It's the current situation that we're in with not having a 5-year land supply. If we had a 5-year land supply, the principle of the development is unlikely to be supported here, but as members are well aware, we're not in that position at the moment, and therefore we have to look at each one on its merits. And the fact that it's open countryside gives it less protection than greenbelt. So again, it's not quite the same high bar as is considered. So yes, it's outside the development boundary. If it gives you any comfort, we have assessed in sustainability terms, because we would still do that. And that it is within walking distance of the facilities around the village. So in that respect, it tilts the balance. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chapman has asked my question. Thank you.
I could see you nodding. Any more? Councillor Steele.
On the same note, I noticed that the Canal and River Trust don't have any objections, which is strange.
Observation. Any more speakers? No? Therefore, I'm going to the vote. The recommendation before you is approval. All those in favour of approval, please show. Anyone against? Or any abstentions? That application is approved. 10-4, no abstentions. Thank you. Okay, we go to the next application. I'll give it a moment while the chamber's cleared of the public. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on and we go to application 25/00972/FUL. This is Grove Cottage, Wolverhampton Road, Chesley-Nay. And it's again Rebecca. Over to you, Rebecca, to outline the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application relates to the residential curtilage of Grove Cottage, which lies just outside of the village boundary of Chesley-Hay within the West Midlands Greenbelt, and seeks planning permission for the erection of 7 detached bungalows with associated landscaping, access road and ancillary works. The council can currently only demonstrate a 0.87-year housing land supply, and as such the tilted balance is in effect for applications proposing new dwellings. The tilted balance sets out that new dwellings should only be refused where there are significant reasons to justify a refusal. On this basis, the applicant has put forward a case for grey belt development under paragraph 155 of the NPPF. The application is considered to be grey belt development, which complies with all of the requirements set out in paragraph 155. The proposed development is therefore considered to be acceptable in principle and does not form inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. The development is not considered to cause any undue harm to either visual or residential amenity, and the layout is considered acceptable on balance, providing 6 2-bed bungalows and 1 3-bed bungalow that meet an identified housing need within the village. The development also raises no material concerns in relation to parking or highway safety, subject to the agreed highways improvement works to reduce the speed limit and provide a new tactile crossing. Given the council's housing land supply position, the tilted balance in favour of granting permission is engaged unless there are sufficiently strong reasons arising from the impacts of the development to warrant the refusal of the application. The development would add a further 7 dwellings to the land supply. The proposal is considered both compliant with both national and local planning policy and associated guidance. As such, the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions and subject to the satisfactory completion of the Section 106 agreement in relation to the Cannock Chase stack and the maintenance of the shared accessway, and a Section 278 highways agreement to secure the highways improvement works. If we just turn to the slides now. Some photographs to show the context. So on the left is a photograph with the village behind you looking towards the site. So you can just about see Grove Cottage there over the hedgerow. On the right hand side, this is taken from just inside the site entrance, and that's the neighbouring dwelling you can see in the background there, Orchard Lane. Next slide, please. Again, this is looking from the other direction from the site entrance in on the right hand side, and that's Grove Cottage itself, you can see. And on the left hand side is some of the ancillary buildings just behind Orchard Lane on the other side of the site. Next slide, please. Both photographs here of the current rear curtilage of Grove Cottage, sort of showing some of the landscaping that is around its rear boundary, looking out towards the open fields at the rear of the site. Next slide, please. And this is taken slightly further back into the plot, looking back towards the street scene. So those are some of the dwellings opposite the site on the edge of the settlement. Again, they're outside of the settlement boundary, but on the edge of the site. Next slide. Showing you a bit of the context of the surrounding site. So there's a site outlined in red. You can see a mixture of development, which is some of it is residential within the wider street scene and surrounding open fields. Next slide, please. This is showing the proposed layout of the site. So we've got 7 bungalows that are maybe sited in alongside Grove Cottage. Again, each dwelling has its own associated residential curtilage and parking space. Next slide, please. This is showing some of the highways improvement works and the access to the site that's being put in. It's being moved slightly and widened to accommodate the proposals. And you can just about see the tactile crossing where Helen's Mouse is that they're proposing to put in. To connect into the pavement on the opposite side of the footpath. Next slide, please. These are the proposed designs for the dwelling elevations. We've got 4 different housing types that have all been bespokely designed for this plot to provide a bit of variation between the bungalows. So if we just go through them, and slight variance. So these are all the 2-bed dwellings, and the final slide is the 3-bed dwelling. Just want to draw members' attention at this stage as well to the comments that have been submitted by both of the local ward councillors, Rob and Susan Duncan, that are contained within the late list. These comments relate to the grey belt classification of the land, the overdevelopment of the plot, the impact on surrounding residential amenity, pressures on local infrastructure, highways capacity and road safety, the sustainability of the site, and the cumulative impact of the amount of development taking place on Cheslin Hay. All of these issues have been discussed at length in the officer's report, but just to draw these to your attention as they weren't included in the original committee agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. We don't have anyone speaking for and against, but we do have the agent applicant, which is Patrick Jervis from Evolve. Can you go to the lectern, please? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. The proposal before you is for 7 high-quality bungalows within the main service village of Cheslin Hay, which will be accessed via an improved existing access from Wolverhampton Road. It is recognised that there are several objections from local residents, the parish council and the ward members. However, the issues raised have been resolved through the evolution of the scheme, and the proposal before the committee this evening is the result of consultative work with technical consultees and the council's planning officers. I would like to thank the council's officers for their constructive and collaborative approach throughout their consideration of the application. As a result, the proposed development before you, which comes before committee this evening, with no objections from any technical or statutory consultee. Although the site lies within the Greenbelt, the applicant agrees with the council's own planning policy officer's assessment that the site provides a weak/no contribution to purposes A, B and D of the Greenbelt, and that the proposal meets the criteria set out in paragraph 155 of the NPPPF. The site therefore falls within national policy definition of grey belt, and in light of the council's current housing land supply shortfall, the proposal does not represent an appropriate development in the Greenbelt. Whilst the site isn't proposed for allocation in the emerging local plan, once adopted, the new local plan will allocate significant areas of land adjacent to the site for a new strategic residential development, which, once delivered, will extend the village further to the south and to the west than the application site. Highway matters have been fully addressed in agreement with Staffordshire County Council as the Highways Authority, and this includes the provision of safe access, a new tactile crossing, and an extension of the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit westwards to improve pedestrian safety and slow traffic entering the village from this direction. The scheme delivers 7 much-needed bungalows supporting older persons and those wishing to downsize. The proposals can be delivered quickly to boost the supply of housing in the short term. All homes meet internal space standards, include off-street parking and private gardens. All properties provide for a modern open plan living and have been designed to reflect local character and provide an attractive development with a clear structure and identity. With no objections from statutory consultees, there are no identified adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the significant benefits that are proposed to be delivered. It is hoped and respectfully requested that members of the committee will agree with their officer's recommendation contained within the thorough and balanced committee report and resolve to grant planning permission subject to the identified conditions and obligations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jervis. Tonight, the local members are not able to be with us, which is Rob and Sue Duncan, but they have expressed their concerns and objections on the late list. So I presume all members have had that opportunity to read them, as Rebecca pointed out. Okay, so therefore, members, it's over to yourselves. Any speakers on this? Councillor Jackson.
Quite an elementary point, really, but my instinct is 7 just feels like too many dwellings, frankly. And also, excuse my ignorance a bit, but is there kind of guidance on how big dwelling should be, and where does this fit within that?
Okay.
In terms of density, the scheme is an acceptable size. All of the plots are providing bigger garden areas than our standards require, and internal space all meets the nationally described space standards. So it is all in compliance in terms of the actual space allocated per plot.
You happy with that? Okay. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure quite a few members here will agree with me on what I'm going to raise. It's called infrastructure in our villages, and I'm quite sure there'll be some heads nodding. This is a very busy road. I'm looking at Councillor Sue Duncan's comments, and I am particularly concerned about that. They say that the pathway down this road is on one side in parts is very narrow and dangerous. And without putting more problems on this stretch of road where children from the top of the road walk to school, they also make the comment about the doctor's surgery there being overwhelmed, which isn't unusual. Also more green belt, which is unacceptable. But I think I do have a problem with this one. Okay, so I might come back. I want to listen to what other people say. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point, Helen. So this is a windfall site. How many properties out of that will be, because there's 70 dwellings, will any of those properties be for shared ownership and stuff like that?
No, they'll all be market dwellings. It's under the threshold for the affordable housing.
Okay. Any more speakers? Councillor Harper. Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a question about the space about dwellings, especially in paragraph 5.3.5. I got the impression that this might be on the borderline case of what was acceptable. 5.3.5 says there are a number of windows within the side facing elevation of Grove Cottage, a landing, first floor bathroom, ensuite and ground floor, serving a WC and the kitchen. To the rear of this, the previously constructed extension has 2 facing secondary habitable windows, with the primary windows to the rear elevation. The council's adopted core strategy requires a minimum distance of 30 metres from the habitable windows to the flank walls, with a distance of 15 metres between facing walls over public space. It is noted there are also 2 windows serving bedrooms proposed to the side elevation of plot 7. The separation distance here will be less than the required 15 metres, although none of the windows will be directly facing one another as they are set at an oblique angle. However, there will still be onlooking between plots, given the proximity of these windows, albeit at angled viewing. And then onwards from there's another point where it says at the front of houses there is a danger of potential loss of privacy because many new developments of open plan frontage and large principal windows. Careful consideration should therefore be given to the positioning and size of windows and their distance from public areas to prevent intrusion, while still providing an element of natural surveillance. In this instance, the distance only falls short of the required standard for 2-storey dwellings by about half a metre, but it still falls short. So my question is, I've tried to summarise the points as best as I can without losing too much of the essence. My question is, to what degree is, in your opinion, as the officers, are those amounts out? Is it a close run thing, or other reasons very justifiable as to why they can be allowed? Thank you.
Helen?
Yeah, it's a fair point. If I go back, if I start there. So you can see the two windows that you referred to there. They're in the extension of Grove Cottage. So that's the host dwelling. So that's the existing property. So if I just flip to here, so that's here where you're looking there. So they're existing windows. This is an existing property, Grove Cottage. You have to bear in mind there's already someone there. It's actually the people who live there who are developing the site. So there's an element of a known change going on there because it's their site redevelopment. In order to be able to facilitate the access road at the required widths and make sure that all of those safety standards are in place, there has to be a balance struck. You could, in theory, redesign some of the internals so that you haven't got habitable room windows facing at what is only a slightly short distance from what is a guidance principle, but then you risk having non-habitable rooms on the front and then you get loss of natural surveillance. So to weigh up those matters, if we'd got a few extra meters width on this site, there wouldn't be a problem. You know, we'd have all of those minimums in place. But what I would say is the shortfalls are minimal shortfalls. Anyone who's moving into these properties will be wholly aware of what it is they're moving into. And I think if you start looking at moving internal layouts around, you risk losing that natural surveillance, which in my opinion is a worse situation because you just haven't got that element of safety when people are going in and out of the site. So are there compromises on the distances? Yes, there are on the guidance distances, but that's to get the best use out of the land and make sure that we deliver the space about dwellings and the internal space standards. So it is a balance. But is that fair to say, Vic? Yeah. Thank you. But sorry, just to follow, it has been worked through quite substantially to get it to this point to reduce down any kind of compromise as far as has been practical. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harper-Wallis.
Thank you, Chair. I think our hands are tied here because, you know, we've not got our act together to get the housing supply. So our officers, you know, as much as we care about window space, infrastructure, all these other things, site complexity and build up, our officers' hands are tied. The planning balance is tilted against them. So their ability to negotiate with applicants is much harder because we don't have a land supply. So we need to get ourselves out of a land supply, and that's why we should be supporting applications that do that as quickly as possible so we can be in a better situation next time when the next one comes in. Unfortunately, we can't do that here because it will just go to appeal and it will just cost us because we've got a land deficit. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, Helen.
Yeah, I should have touched on that, sorry, the infrastructure point, because the dwellings we've got here is 7, it's not meeting any of the thresholds for us to be able to take contributions towards certain sets of whatever that infrastructure might be and where the need might be that you're used to seeing on the major developments. It just doesn't meet those policy triggers. So that is a fair point. We won't be able to secure it on this one. What we have secured is the improved access, because it is acknowledged that that's not ideal at the moment, but that is, as recommended in the report, going to be improved. So the access to the village will be upgraded. But yeah, it's a fair point on infrastructure that's acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stu.
Just an observation, really. It isn't these 7 dwellings that are causing the problems in Chesley and Hay. It's all the previous development that's gone ahead.
Observation. I always say that. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the most important thing that we've got to face is we've got to find these houses. And we've got an opportunity tonight on the other side. If we turn it down, I'll appeal and we'll lose it. Technical reports, as the agent said, are all in favour. So even on the lateness, the local members are pointing out the dangers. Can't go against the technical report from Highways. We've learned our lesson before. So for me, this is an opportunity build some houses that we desperately need.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Any more? No? Sorry, Councillor Sutton, I didn't see you there. Okay.
Not a problem, Chair. My concern is that this particular area, Cheslingham, Great Worley, have in the past always expressed supply about water as one of the major problems and issues in that particular area. And although I understand and appreciate the debate and discussion that we've had, I am concerned about making sure that whatever new properties we build in any of the areas, especially areas which have been identified as having a poor infrastructure for the three main supplies of water that we talk about, removal of foul, provision of fresh and surface water, that has been adequately and appropriately addressed within the officers' comments. I'm sure it has, but I was trying to look through and I couldn't see anything mentioning it. Perhaps Helen or Rebecca could have a mention on it.
Rebecca.
So the applicant has submitted drainage plans for the disposal of foul and surface water flows, which have been considered acceptable, and Severn Trent haven't raised any objections to the scheme, so there's no grounds there to say there's potentially going to be an issue.
Then just take it as an observation, please, Chair, because as I say, we know from this planning committee, every application for those particular areas, Cheslingham, Great Worley, have always had problems with water supply, especially fresh water supply.
Councillor Sutton, you've mentioned this problem elsewhere, and I have to say that we have been trying to contact Severn Trent. That is still ongoing, so that has not been ignored, I promise you. Thank you. Any more speakers? No, I'll go to the vote then. The recommendation is for approval. All those in favour of approval, please show. That's unanimous? Yeah. Okay, therefore that application is approved. Thank you, members.